Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michel Botman. Welcome to this presentation of OTF Connects titled Voting Rights Through Time, Inquiry and Blended Learning with Zoe Flatman and Rachel Collishaw. Before starting, as usual, OTF is asking us to do a quick land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that we are gathered in the territories of various indigenous people, and we further recognize their stewardships of these lands in which we live, learn, work, and play. We are definitely thrilled to have each and every one of you today. We are 13 in the class for the moment, and I'm expecting a few more participants. And we are definitely thrilled to have Zoe Flatman and Rachel Collishaw of Election Canada with us this afternoon. Zoe Flatman is an award-winning teacher in the Toronto District School Board, currently on secondment with Election Canada as the Civic Education Coordinator for the Greater Toronto Area. Zoe has a passion for global citizenship, sustainability, and civic engagement. And Rachel is the second presenter today. And Rachel Collishaw is a secondary school teacher and instructional coach in the Ottawa area. She is the recipient of the 2013 Governor General's History Award for Excellence in Teaching and the author of several history and citizenship learning resources. She's currently on secondment as pedagogical advisor to Election Canada. And we have a relatively small group today, but for this type of subject, it's actually quite nice. Expecting about 15, 20 people in the class by the time we all go in. And so at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I guess, Rachel, you're going to share your screen? Perfect. Okay, so we'll go. You can share your screen anytime you want. Let's see if it
Okay, great. Let's get that up here.
Perfect. Working well. You can see
Lovely.
it. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Zoe to get us going.
Great, thank you, and welcome everyone. We're really happy that you're here to learn about this amazing resource. I know it's Rachel's favorite, and it's certainly one of my top 3 that we have available. And it's a really versatile one. It works across the Canadian World Studies and Social Science and Humanities curriculum. So we'll talk a little bit about how it can work in your classroom. So before we get started, we'd just like to kind of find out a little bit about what your teaching environment looks like. Whoop, can we go back one?
Oh, sorry.
So we're just going to paste a link to a quick poll, Google poll, in the chat so that you can let us know. There it is. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I sent it just to Zoe. Hold on a second. I'm going to resend it. My mistake. My mistake. Okay, yeah, here's the link.
So if you could just take a minute to give us a quick little sense of who's here and what your learning environment is.
Sorry about that.
So Zoe, I'm going to share the results, which are on a different screen. So I'm going to flip over.
Okay. There should be no problem for each of you to share your screen one at a time. Yeah, perfect.
Oh, that's interesting. There are quite a few folks who are in person only, so that's interesting. All right, so it looks like we've got a real diverse group of folks here today, which is super. All right, great, thank you. Okay. So
go back to the slides here. Just move along.
Yep.
I just want to explain to everyone that Zoe has problem with her bandwidth, with her internet. Rachel is actually managing the slides, and Zoe is doing the presentation. So we are all working,
all working
together.
together.
Exactly.
That's right. I'm doing the talking. I love to talk anyway, so it works out well. So as you can see, these are some of the characteristics of all of our resources. They're all inquiry-based, cross-curricular, collaborative, nonpartisan, bilingual, accessible, and the best part of all, they're free. And we'll tell you about how you can get your hands on them later on in the presentation. So you can order physical kits or download the resources from our website, and we'll give you the link a little bit later on. All of these resources are very high quality. We've got videos, maps, data, infographic, case studies, and a whole lot more. So you'll get a chance to sort of get an introduction to voting rights through time, both the face-to-face version and the blended today, but you'll be able to dig a little bit deeper later. So when the pandemic struck, we were trying to think about how we could possibly help support teachers, since our resources are meant to be done collaboratively in groups face-to-face. We knew that wasn't going to work. So we pivoted a little bit to think about how we could support you in a more blended learning environment. And so we're going to briefly go over some of these things with you today. I don't know if you can see very well the table on the right-hand side of your screen. That's the blended learning guide we've provided, and we've given you in-person and online versions of each of the activities, and you can pick and choose as you like. So perhaps you do the Minds On in class, in person, have the students do the activity online, and then come back to do the consolidation together, or whatever works best in your particular situation. So these are really the criteria for effective blended learning. And this is what we've tried to take into account as we've developed these resources. We want a seamless connection between in-class and online learning, really using a virtual learning environment effectively, increase student-to-student and student-to-teacher collaboration, student control over pace, place, and time of learning and path of learning, as well as repurposed instructional time. And we'll point out some of these things as we go through the adaptations that we've done. So let's jump into voting rights through time. So the inquiry question for this particular resource is, how inclusive is our democracy? And that's what students are going to investigate as they go through this activity. So every resource has a Minds On that allows students to connect their own experience to what they're going to be learning and exploring throughout the activity. So in this case, we start by asking students to think about a time when they felt excluded from something, and we want them to share how that felt. So we don't want them to describe the event to us, but we want them to share some of those feelings, like what it felt like to be excluded. And of course, it's really important here for anonymity, whether you're doing this in a face-to-face class or whether you're doing it online. We're asking students to be vulnerable, and so we want to create that safe space for them. And so we want it to be anonymous as much as possible. All right.
So you'll see that Michelle put the link to the Google form. So we're asking you to complete the Minds On. Sorry, I meant to share the results. Here we go.
That's okay. Yeah, so if you can go to that Minds On form that we've created, in a classroom, students would use Post-it notes, right, to do this, and then you would put them up on a board or something like that. But we've created an anonymous Google Doc.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite things about this activity is seeing the range of vocabulary use that students have, and so just kind of looking at the words that they come up with to describe these feelings usually gives you a really great indicator of the language level in the class. So yeah, if it's all just sort of happy and sad, you know, you could do a little bit more, a little bit of time on vocabulary building. But usually we find teachers are pretty good at this. They have a pretty broad range.
You'll still get the sad, bad, mad in just about every class.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It does provide for a good vocabulary.
Yeah, and we've made some neat like word clouds with these over time too. I mean, there's, it's just you don't need to spend a lot of time here, but it's super interesting to us to kind of see how the different groups of students come up with words.
And really what we're doing at this point, as you'll see in a minute, is we're really co-creating with our students some criteria that they are going to be using in the activity portion of this lesson. So it's a great way for them to be involved in co-creating that criteria.
Okay, so we're going to go back to the slides now.
Go back. So we started with the time being excluded, and of course we don't want to leave them out there on that limb. We want to bring it back to a more positive sort of spin. And ask them about a time when they felt included, right? So we want to keep that conversation balanced. And as you can see in this photo, this is not a student that you're seeing here. You'll see this gentleman over here. That is Stéphane Perreault. He is the Chief Electoral Officer of Canada. And he visited a class here in Toronto in East York Collegiate. And worked on this activity with a grade 10 history class. So that's him pasting his post-it note on the board. So now we're going to introduce students to inclusion in voting rights. So there's Stéphane again. He's working with a group of students who are now into the activity part of this. So they're going to, normally they would work in small groups, as you can see here, and place cards on an activity board. Okay. So the physical kit that you can order comes with that timeline that you can see there, a context card to give students a bit of background on a case study, as well as case study cards. So we have women, youth, Japanese Canadians, and our newest First Nations peoples. We're also working on an Inui case study at the moment in concert with ITK, who is giving us a lot of advice and a lot of eyes on the project. So that we hope will be coming fairly soon down the way. So here he is again, and you can see placing the cards. And what you'll notice in the background here is that the teacher has written the words that came out of the minds onto that chart paper, just to remind students as they're going through this activity. So they're placing cards on a timeline in chronological order, but they're also making judgments about whether this event in the case study led to more inclusion or exclusion from our democracy. So they've created these sort of criteria that they can refer back to if they're trying to make that decision about inclusion or exclusion. So they're reading the case study card aloud, placing it on the board in order, and then inclusion or exclusion scale.
Yeah, and I think the really important thing is that it's done in collaboration in this in-person version, that the students are discussing and perhaps disagreeing about where they might go, and then reaching a consensus, we hope.
Right. And in some cases, oftentimes students will begin going in sort of chronological order, and then often they'll come back to something and change their mind. And that's really terrific, because what we want to focus on here is the conversation that students are having. It's not about where they ultimately place the card, because every group will look different. And that's what I love about this activity. If students walk around afterwards, every timeline looks different, right? But it's that critical conversation that they've had that's important. So, because we can't be crowded together and working in groups, we've adapted this to an online environment, and we're going to give you the link in just a second for you to see. We'll take a look at the First Nations case study, and you will be able to sort of go through and decide whether you think it's a case of inclusion or exclusion. Okay. So we'll give you a couple of minutes with the form, and then come back and we'll take a look at what you came up with.
Rachel, when the exercise is taking place, you can actually see the student placing the images in real time, or you see it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of my favorite parts is walking around and hearing the conversations that they're having as they discuss, you know, where it should go. And we made a bunch of them kind of tricky on purpose so that it would incite that kind of discussion. And it's pretty easy to see, you know, when one person's taken over the whole group, or if they haven't actually read the cards, because you have a pretty good sense of where they're supposed to, where they usually end up. Sometimes just a matter of degree. But yeah, I did hear back from a teacher who's used these with her in-person class, but she had the students just do the Google form first and then work with the real physical cards after, so that they had the chance to kind of read them all through on their own and have a think about it first before they entered into that conversation. So that's a really nice way that you can use the blended tools.
Excellent.
Oh, so I see some responses are coming in, so I'm going to switch over to the other screen.
Yeah, we see it.
Okay, great.
There's
a lot of agreement on this.
Exactly.
That's a surprise. Oh, good. Here we
There's
are.
some disagreement. Oh, interesting. Yeah, okay.
And it's interesting that I see that the form updates as responses are coming in. You can see the form updating itself in real time. That's really nice.
So if you had your students do this on their own, you wouldn't sort of be watching necessarily the responses come in. But the nice thing about it is this can be a good example of repurposed class time, right? So students could do this work on their own so that when they come to class, they have a certain idea and you can have a much richer conversation about it and about the differences, particularly for those students who maybe are a little bit more shy and don't want to disagree necessarily. They have some support maybe with this form. So it can repurpose that time that you can have more critical in-person conversation after they've had to think through.
And you see the student's name, or it's anonymous?
It's anonymous.
Yeah. So the way Google Forms works is that you can have students, you know, it can collect your emails, but we want it for this one not to, right?
To have the freedom to answer.
Yeah, to have the freedom to answer how you want. And so you can see the individual responses, but it doesn't show who responded to them. Yeah. One of the, can I?
Go ahead.
Oh, maybe I'll talk about it later. I was going to talk about the time immemorial card, but if you want to carry on, we can.
That's a great
sure, yeah. Yeah, you can chat, maybe mention that.
So this final card in the series that doesn't, so all the other ones you'll notice have a date. This one, the date is from time immemorial to the present. And so this was really important to us to, you know, talk about that First Nations peoples had many different ways of governing themselves for many thousands of years before Canada even existed. And the fact that it doesn't really fit on the timeline. So when we watch students trying to put these cards on the timeline, they're like, I don't know what to do with this one. And that's part of the conversation as well. It's really disrupting that idea that, you know, time is linear and, you know, that a timeline is the only way to look at history. So so I think it's a really important component in this particular case study. Okay, so we'll move back to the
Yep. So again, just to reiterate, this is a great example. First of all, students, if they're doing it on their own outside of class time, have control over their pace of learning and so on. But it also helps, as I mentioned, repurpose that instructional time. So that's a great way to use it.
Yeah, shall I move along?
Yep.
Okay.
The other thing that we include in the kit is a turning point frame. So that's the little green cardboard frame that you see here in the photo. And this isn't a mandatory, it's an optional sort of thing, but it works really well in a history class with that historical thinking lens of process of change, right? And what is the turning points in that continuity and change thinking concept? So students decide where the turning point is on their timeline. And again, you can have significant differences. So different groups will doing the same case study will place that frame in a different place. If you're doing an online version, then we'll show you in a moment the timeline that we've created online. Students can also do that by just putting like a star or something over top of the card that they think is the turning point.
So are we moving to the next one? Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe. There we go.
So this is what we have created as our online adaptation. So we've created a Google Draw where we have put all of the cards on there. And we'll show you how we can demonstrate how it can work. I think I should be able to share that.
Oh, I've got it up.
You got it? Okay, great. So this is the First Nations Peoples case study. So we have instructions in the lower right of the frame there. If you are using a non-Mac computer, then you would Control-Alt-Y to get the text. So this is the same text and images that you saw in the Google form, but students can now drag them around on the timeline, okay, to show that plus or minus. If you're using a Mac, then it is Option-Command-Y to get the alt text. So Michelle has put the link in the chat if you want to go and have a look at it. Maybe take about 5 minutes and you can go and play with the timeline on your own, make a copy and take a look and play with that. And then come back.
And no, go ahead, Rachel.
I was just going to say this would be a great moment if you want to ask any questions. We're a pretty small group, so if you want to just unmute or if you want to pop any questions you have in the chat or comments, we'd be happy to address
Please feel free.
Yeah, that's the beauty of small groups, because we sometimes have 100 people in the class and we have to be more strict, but when it's a small group like today, we are 14 in the class, so anyone that wants to turn their microphone on or their camera and chat with Rachel or Zoe, you're all welcome, obviously. And I know that you are. Yes, we have a French timeline. We did the one in French yesterday, and
so everything is completely bilingual. So and in this resource, everything is the same content in English and French. I was just showing how to use a shape use a shape and find a little star and put it on if you wanted to use the turning point there. But we will be sharing, and you don't even have to wait till tomorrow. Like, you'll get the link at the end of the webinar, and you can go make all the copies you want.
And I also pasted in the chat box the link to the OTF resource page, and the session that we recorded yesterday is already posted. So if you go to that link, you can actually listen to the session that was presented yesterday by Camille, and you will be able to access all the resources in French on that page.
Yeah. So and I mean, if you are using breakout, if you're in an online only situation and you're using breakout rooms, like this would be a pretty great little activity for students to be doing together, discussing, we would hope.
Right. You could do that collaboration online in this way. Just on the subject of language, all of the resources, as Rachel said, are available in both official languages. We also have language learner versions. So if you are a French immersion teacher, for example, then you would probably want the simplified language version of the French, whereas the regular French is meant more for Francophone students. The vocab is a little bit higher. And
we do have language learner versions in English
as well. So if you have literacy learners, language learners in your class, you can use the language learner version. There are fewer cards, a couple less, and also simpler vocab.
Yeah.
Shorter
And
sentences, simpler.
everything that you'll find in the blended learning resources, we use the language learner just because we know that learning online and reading online is not always easy. We all have shorter attention spans.
Exactly. So these are all the language learner versions.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to get back on the slides, Zoe, I think.
Yep.
We're ready to move along. Okay.
Okay, so if you want to come on back and join us, if you're still playing with the with the timeline there. So after the students have gone through the activity, be it the Google form or in person, I think really the important part then is the discussion that you're going to have. And we've chosen this question, is getting the right to vote, does it always mean more inclusion in democracy or inclusion in democracy? This is a great question for history class, but maybe you have a different focus in your class, so you might want to ask a different question after students have done this. But this is the kind of the question that we came up with. Feel free to adapt it to meet the learners in your class.
Yeah, we also suggest about 3 or 4 other questions in the teacher's guide as well. So yeah, I mean, it's really that important idea is to come back with your class and have that conversation, that discussion.
Right. And you can see that the students in this photo are using the paper version of the thinking guide where they're recording all of this. So they recorded their minds on there. They're also recording their answers to this kind of discussion. You could use a discussion forum in your virtual learning environment. We also have an online version of the thinking guide that students could use and type in their answers as well. And then finally, we have developed these 2 sort of infographics. One is a video infographic, the other is on paper, depending on you know, what your situation is, to reflect back on how voting has changed over this time. So in 1867, 11% of the population of Canada had the right to vote versus over 70% today. So it's just a way of looking at over this time just how much voting rights have changed for Canadians. And this helps the students to really see the big picture, that it has become much more inclusive over time. And again, they can think about this by using the thinking guide or the online version.
It's also a great place to connect to the charter if that's one of the topics that you'll be discussing in your class, because it was in fact the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that made the biggest changes to electoral law in Canada in terms of inclusiveness.
Great. Okay, so these are the questions that the students would ask or would answer as an individual reflection as part of an exit ticket. So most of our resources, or all of our resources, have an exit ticket associated with them. Generally, we have about 3 questions that can help them think a little bit more broadly, put what they've learned into some context, and maybe even learn or lead to more inquiry into the subject or related topics as well. Another thing you might have your students do is create their own case study based on what they've learned for another group in Canada, for example. And we have blank cards online that you can use for students to create their own case study to go along with this. All right, so before we go on to talk a little bit about where you can get the resources and some other things that might be of interest to you, wanted to get from you some feedback about this particular resource and what you might have thought about, or what might have come to mind as you've been going through taking a quick look at these resources. So thank you for putting the link in the chat. If you could just give us a little bit of quick feedback, and then I'll talk about where you can get them and all of that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, I think the great thing about this resource is that it can be such a great springboard to lots of further learning. And you know, we've designed it so that it can be done just in one period with different groups taking different case studies. But many teachers find they like to extend it over a couple of class periods to really have students explore all of the case studies themselves.
And just one question that I have, do you recommend that they use it as is, or do you recommend that they tailor it and change some of the cards, or it's not designed to be?
Yeah, so this one we recommend that they use it as is to kind of
Mhm.
understand these case studies, and then you know, the developing your own case studies with different groups. You know, that would be the modification. Use your, you know, have the students do it yourself or have the students do it. And we do provide some starting points in our teacher backgrounders within the teacher's guide. So there's quite a lot of for each of the 4 case studies. We do have you know, some background information to help teachers answer questions and, you know, give a little bit more detail, as well as sort of just other facts of interest, a little bit of mention about other groups that were or were not excluded from voting rights. So for example, Black Canadians and Métis people were never excluded explicitly from voting rights, but there were other groups like conscientious objectors and other religious groups like the Doukhobors that were excluded for various reasons over time.
Okay. I didn't know. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we all didn't know. And if you really get excited, the Elections Canada website, the elections.ca, there's a just recently updated history of the vote resource that tells everything in great detail.
Mhm.
From pre-Confederation to the present. Yeah.
When I've done this resource with classes in person, particularly, oftentimes teachers or I will have students do sort of like a bit of a gallery walk to look at the groups who have done the same case study that they have done to see what is similar and different, but also to have a look at the other case studies. So you can kind of, there are certain points where there seems to be a lot of change going on for a lot of different groups. So, you know, students can talk about, well, what do they think was happening that was leading to so much change for so many different groups at that particular time. So there's lots of different ways to engage in conversation over.
Yeah. So I just see the responses are coming in from the group. I'm not going to share these ones just because you have shared your personal information. So thanks for all the new ideas for sharing those. And one of the things that somebody said was Google Draw for timelines is so cool that they didn't know it existed. I actually made that when I was sitting right here. So it was quite a lot of work, but feel free to copy and use it yourself. But yeah, I mean, Google Draw is such a flexible tool. It can be used in a lot of different ways. Yeah. So some of the questions. So I wonder how this will work with my group in particular this year. I mean, we all wonder that for sure. What are our other lessons? We are going to talk about those in a minute. Could you role play to reach more students and create deeper learning? Huh, interesting. I would have a lot of hesitation about role playing on issues of inclusion and exclusion. I think that is kind of dangerous territory in history
It's a touchy subject for
lessons.
sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I would avoid when you're talking about these kinds of exclusive
Mhm.
exclusions in history. I would more just try to listen to more of the voices of people who have been excluded. So, you know, seek out some of those personal experiences. Connecting to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So we do provide, like I said, a little bit more background in the teacher's guide about that. But again, I would refer you to the history of the vote on the elections.ca main website, where there's quite a lot of interesting things that have happened since the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and how, for example, prisoners and, you know, Canadians overseas who've lived overseas for more than 5 years now have been included. But yeah, in fact, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms was the biggest, made the most changes to electoral law to include and mostly to give access, right? So we're just talking about the right to vote, but there's all the access issues, right, for Canadians with disabilities and motivational barriers. Another question, what else is on your resource website? So I think we have time to give you a bit of a tour in a few moments. And meaningful ways to build upon the questions and learning from this activity. So we also do provide some extension ideas within the teacher's guide. But yeah, I mean, I can think of a lot of different ways, but we can certainly address the other resources and what else is on our website next. So I'm going to move all the slides along so we can get right to that.
So here they are. These are all of the resources that we offer. They're all available for download on the website, or as I said, you can order kits. So the voting rights through time, you see there, it comes with 6 timelines and sorry, 5 timelines.
No.
5 timelines. It's just changed because we've just added the new case study. So we have 5 timelines and 1 set of each of the 5 case studies.
There's only 4 case studies right now.
Oh, right. Sorry. That's never mind. I beg your pardon.
I think maybe you get 8 and 2 of each of the 4.
I think you get
I don't
8
know yet.
timelines.
Anyway, you get enough for a class.
You get multiples and enough for a class. And if you want to, you can print out additional, all of the cards are online as well. You can print out additional copies. Sorry, we've been having so many conversations and so many new case studies coming on. I apologize. I'm a little confused. The digital skills for democracy is a great digital literacy piece that works in any class. It works
and we'll be doing a webinar on that one in February, right?
Yeah, that's the next webinar. So if you're interested in digital literacy across the curriculum, it focuses on political and election issues because of our mandate, but it really is a great way to think about digital literacy. Does voting matter is a fun activity that you can do to really investigate that question, you know, does voting really matter? Civic action then and now is one of my favorites. It's a great one with case studies as well, and it has Indigenous content in that one. So that one's another great one that you can use. The one on the far right, which election, is a newer one that was developed in consultation and coordination with all of the electoral management bodies across Canada, the provincial and territorial. So this is a real effort for all the electoral bodies to come together and
to help students understand about the 3 levels of government.
Right, so it talks about the 3 levels of government, both rights and responsibilities of those levels, as well as, you know, how the electoral process might work.
Yeah, it's more of a station-based activity.
Yep. And we have 2 great geography resources and a numeracy resource as well. And our election simulation toolkit, which is a great one for teaching the electoral process outside of election years. So we don't have elections every year. We do encourage you to get involved with student vote during those election years, but in between you can use the election simulation toolkit, and we've just updated it. The new version will be coming
this spring.
So keep an eye out for that. That's
something to hope for. We also are going to be doing a webinar on elections by the numbers in February as well. So right after digital skills.
Right, which is a big numeracy piece.
Yeah.
The other thing that we have for you, and I have this queued up if you want me.
Sure, you go ahead and share, Zoe, if you're able to. Okay.
But I can get it up for you really quickly. So we also have a number of other tools on our website that are really helpful. And one of them is the curriculum connections page. So under classroom tab at the top there, helpful tools, you'll see curriculum connections. So what you can do is you have to put in your territory or province or territory, but then you can search by course or subject area, you can search by language, and by the actual resource. So if we look at the voting rights through time resource, you can see these are all of the courses that have specific expectations that match up with this resource. So we've gone through the curriculum across the entire country, all 10 provinces and 3 territories.
Thousands of data points.
To find those specific expectations. So this is just a range of places where you could use this particular resource.
Yeah, so if you were interested in finding all of our resources that have something to do with history, oh, I guess these are our resources. Never mind.
No, those are the courses.
Yeah, those are the
so
courses.
Then you would just click on the course and it'll give you a drop down to show you which resources we suggest for that particular course.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I guess I'll go back to the slides. I'm getting really good at this. And I'll get back to the main page so we can demo this.
Okay, so this is our dedicated website. You can find a link through the Elections Canada website if you are looking, but we have our own website with all of our resources and all of the tools to help you, electionsandemocracy.ca. And we are also on social media. So we hope that you'll follow us and keep up to date on what we're doing and what is new at Democracy CA is our Twitter handle, and Elections and Democracy is our name on Facebook.
So I think somebody had a question about what else is on our website. So, I mean, we could just do a quick tour of the resources. So this is our homepage. You can go right to the blended learning tools here. We've got some blogs that kind of give you a bit of backgrounder. So you can go right here and that'll take you off our website. So you can go to the order form at Elections Canada and order the physical kits, or you can go view them online. So for each one, you can see we've got a little at a glance, and you can see that this one has a language learner version. And then you can see all of the stuff. So this is where you get to the blended learning version. So you get to our little Google Drive spot, and you can see the blended learning guide, and then all the tools are in here, so you can make your own copies so that you can see all your student answers with all the specific things that you're going to need. And so you can get a quick glance at the teacher's guide here. So it's all in this sort of accordion. This getting ready is really helpful because it lists all the different pieces that you need. If you were looking for those blank cards, they're here. And brief history of the federal voting rights in Canada, as well as all the background information for each of the case studies. So there's quite a lot with this included with this material. So there's the video, and we also provide a slide deck for teachers, which looks a lot like the one that we just saw. I mean, minus the pictures of students. Or we use some of them, so you can see, so you can just like run it in your classroom or load it into your Pear Deck or whatever you're using. And you'll see everything down here at the bottom as well. And if you are wanting those language learner cards, you can choose them in the tab down here. The other big area of things that is available on our website is this Canada's elections section, where we were getting a lot of traffic here in the fall because of those political events to the south of us. So we have just a very nice student-friendly sort of steps of the election process, and each one has a description. We also have a little bit about Elections Canada, links to all the provincial and territorial electoral bodies, a little bit about youth voting trends in Canada, so seeing like how youth are voting over time, and my personal favorite web page, our FAQ. So students asked and we answered. So students have asked us all these questions over time, and we've provided an official Elections Canada answer, plus maybe a little bit more information or a question to talk about. So if you're addressing some of these questions in your classroom, you can have a look at these sort of more official answers that we've provided and see what other students across Canada have asked. Was there anything else, Zoe, that we wanted to show on the website? Professional learning, maybe?
Yes, professional learning.
So we now have teacher support videos. So they each resource has this video with this interesting looking presenter um, who describes to you in about 5 minutes what it's taken us almost an hour to talk about right now. So it gives you like a quick overview. So if you're interested in sort of finding out a bit more about what that resource is about, you can just watch the 5-minute video. So that was brand new. It's just landed last week. And we also have lists of workshops. So all these webinars and other webinars that you might be able to participate in are available here. And we are now available to be booked to come to your school, department, board, whatever group of teachers you have to do more or less, this kind of virtual session about any of our resources. And we'll have, this is not up yet, which is why I'm not clicking on it, but it should be up by next week, and you should be able to book straight through the website. So I'm going to go back.
So does anybody have any questions about this resource or anything else that we might be able to offer?
If you have questions, don't hesitate to unmute yourself because we're a small group, or you can type your questions in the chat box.
Yeah.
So quiet.
Okay. I guess everything was very clearly explained, and there's no question, which is which means that it was perfect.
Perfect. Excellent.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing then.
Okay. So I'm going to jump back in for a few minutes. Just want to thank you, Zoe and Rachel, for this fantastic presentation. Really, it's great because these are a little bit different from the usual curriculum webinars that we have at OTF. So we definitely learned a lot about a topic that is a bit different from what we usually do. And since there are no final question, I just want to share with you a few more pieces of information. If you just bear with me, I'm just going to share my screen again. Okay. So I also want to thank all of you for participating today. It was really a great session. And I want to let you know that you will receive tomorrow a follow-up email with all the information that has been shared today, all the links. There will be a link to the recording of the session and to the slide deck. There will also be a link to a small evaluation questionnaire. And we would like you to please fill up that survey because it helps us to improve our webinars. And you will also have access to all the recorded sessions, including the one that we did yesterday in French and other sessions that were done in the past. And you can search by presenter, by the way. You can enter the name of the presenter and you can see all the sessions that have been presented by Rachel, for instance, over the last few years. I also want to tell you, actually, I want to tell you that we have 2 more sessions in English on February the 10th and February the 17th, and they will be presented again by Zoe and Rachel. Digital skills for democracy, and then the last one will be election by the numbers. And obviously we hope to see you again for these 2 sessions in February. And I also want to mention something because we were talking about role playing. We have another, role playing in the context of some of the issues that are related with the Canadian past. And we have another very interesting session next week. It's called Decolonizing Voice. Whose voice is it? And it's next Tuesday, January 26th. And it's going to be very interesting. I think you might like it as well. It's in English. And one of the presenters is Matt Sheehan, and the other one is Roy. I forgot his last name, but anyway, it doesn't matter. But I think it would be very, very interesting. And actually, Matt told me a story about role playing because he goes to classes to talk about these subjects. And he once went to a class, and the teacher had built a teepee at the back of the class, and the students were dressed in native clothing. And he was quite shocked. And he, of course, he tried to explain that, for him it wasn't appropriate. But anyway, but all I'm saying is that it can be a touchy subject. But anyway, so it's an interesting session that we have on Tuesday, January 26th next week. So you can register for that one as well. And as well as for the two sessions with Zoe and Rachel in February. So that's it. One more thing, I will put a few things for you in the chat box. If you give me a second, I'll just do that quickly. Here are the links to the evaluation form, to the OTF calendar, if you want to register for these sessions or for the session next week, and also to our resources. And all of that will be provided to you again by email tomorrow. So that's it. I just want to thank all of you again, especially Zoe and Rachel, for being with us and for presenting this great session. Thanks so much. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks everyone for coming, and I hope you'll come to the next one. That's my favorite resource.
Bye. Yes, and
hope.
Thanks for all your great feedback in the chat, folks.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording and then I'm going to quit the session. Thanks so much.